There are many mysteries wrapped up in the Lord of the Rings of Power, but one Theo riddle may be best left unsolved. The Rings of Power Season 1 thrived on enigma, teasing the Stranger, Ardar, and Halbrand as potential Saurons in hiding. The Season 1 finale revealed Halbrand as Sauron, while Season 2 launched into the mystery of the Stranger's identity, which was revealed in the Season 2 finale. It goes without saying that suspense is a key feature of the show, but Theo may do better left out of this tactic. The Rings of Power Season 3 is surely set to tackle the identity of the Dark Wizard. This is a fair thread to pursue across the season and could easily culminate in another season-ending reveal, but the show may want to look into one big question about Theo as well. Theo is an original character in Rings of Power, beautifully portrayed by Tyro Mahafadin. His story was integral to Season 1, and he could have a whole new relevance going forward. There is ample subject matter to explore here, without diving into the question of Theo's parentage. The Rings of Power Season 3 should leave the mystery of Theo's father unsolved. Viewers don't need to know Theo's parentage. Arondir, Ismael Cruz Cordova, and Theo, Tyro Mahafadin, reunite and say goodbye to the giant trees in The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 Episode 4. The Rings of Power has raised the question of Theo's father, but it shouldn't necessarily answer it. Theo's mother was Bronwyn, played by Nazanin Boniadi. Sadly, Bronwyn died between Seasons 1 and 2, reflecting Boniadi's choice to leave the show for other projects. But Theo's father was absent and the Rings of Power never confirmed his identity. While the Rings of Power Season 2 artfully revealed the Stranger's identity hint by hint, Theo's parentage hasn't been treated in the same way so far, so it may be odd for the show to suddenly change that. The Rings of Power showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay revealed at the San Diego Comic-Con that they did, in fact, plan to insert more content on Theo's father into the show in future seasons. Theo's father has been set up as a mystery on the show, with one Season 1 conversation involving Theo being teased about the possibility of his mother's unfaithfulness. Despite this setup, the show has clearly not pursued this as a major plot point yet, not having dropped hints about it the way it did with the identities of the Stranger and Sauron. This could be for the best. Complicating Theo's family history risks continuing a common Rings of Power complaint. Revealing Theo's parentage could overcomplicate the Rings of Power. Tyro Mahafadin as Theo in The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2. Shining more light on Theo's family history may continue a commonly cited issue with the Rings of Power. Theo is not a character that J.R.R. Tolkien created for The Lord of the Rings Second Age, rather he is an invention of the Rings of Power. This means that Theo innately runs the risk of bringing the show further from a faithful adaptation of its source material. While original material is necessary in all adaptations and especially in ones with such tough source material, focusing on Theo's family in Season 3 would allow the show less time to explore critical storylines. The Rings of Power must explore the forging of the One Ring in Season 3 and also the origins of the Lord of the Rings ringwraiths, as Sauron must now give out the Rings of Men to their individual bearers. The show may also have to start tackling its Numenor arc, which has been strongly foreshadowed on the show and confirmed by crew in interviews. Exploring Theo's parentage could overcomplicate an original character that is already strong and detract from these key Tolkien arcs. Giving Theo a Tolkien character for a parent would be even riskier. Theo's true identity should be more important than his parentage in the LOTR show. Theo's story stands well enough on its own in Rings of Power. Theo's importance to the story and full identity are more important than his parentage, so the show needn't lose time on exposing Theo's father. The two questions are inherently linked, but it makes more sense to focus on Theo's future than his past. Theo's position in the Lord of the Rings timeline and the Rings of Power's development makes him a candidate for a few interesting characters from lore. This can be explored without derailing the faithfulness of the adaptation, and can also tie into the show's most important Season 3 tentpoles. The Rings of Power has a lot of lore to fit into its 5 planned seasons, which should be a detailed version of the story that Peter Jackson told in his prologue in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. As such, the show should focus Season 3 on where it matters. In a sense, Theo turning out to be a Tolkien character could play out a trend that some find frustrating, that of original characters eventually being revealed as figures from LOTR. However, if Theo becomes a ringwraith, that could fit into Season 3's rhythm nicely. With Sauron set to hand out the Nine, it would make sense for the show to have already introduced one or more of their bearers. This will create more impact when the bearers of the rings fall into Sauron's slavery. If Theo gets a ring in Season 3 and starts becoming a Nazgul, the show can stick to schedule and also make Theo's continuing relevance to the show clear. Theo's parentage is superfluous to this important arc, while most of the ringwraiths don't have known identities, so the Lord of the Rings of Power inventing them doesn't contradict lore.